Okay, good afternoon and welcome to our webinar, which is Top Tips for Template Design and Development. Today I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. Myself, I'm Gemma Chalk, I head up account management here at 15 Below. I'm joined by Marcus Dibb, who is our digital interaction designer, and also Neil Chalk, who is our product manager.
Hello.
So on today's webinar, we're going to be covering the user interface and template management, design considerations, unsupported CSS in emails, email development order, testing your templates, and then finally wrapping up with a conclusion. On that note, I'll hand over to Marcus, who'll be hosting the session today, and Neil.
Hi everyone, it's Neil Chalk here. So I'm just going to run you through some of the user interface elements and capabilities that we have in the platform, just to put into context some of the topics that Marcus will then talk about the actual content. So really the first kind of thing to consider when creating a new template is what dynamic content you want included, and is that data already mapped? We have a standard as part of the platform set of data that we map for most reservation systems, but for particular things you might want extra information in there. So on the right hand side there you can see a screenshot from our user interface, which just basically shows the capability that we have of pulling out different bits of information and then formatting it ready to go into a template. That allows you to really personalize and customize the message that you have for each person. Kind of building on from that, we also have what are called dynamic rules that allow you to do things like in the example here where we're displaying multiple flights, and it will actually go around in a little loop printing out flight numbers, departure cities and arrival cities of each flight. So these business rules then allow you to further extend the content that you show people and build things up like itineraries, seat numbers, and things like that in your template. So these elements fit inside what are actually called elements inside the user interface. And once you have those in the system, you've got your dynamic content, you've got your business rules that are in the dynamic rules, you can then apply the HTML to them. So that's what you can see in the screenshot here. We've got some HTML which contains some dynamic content in there. Each one of these elements is then used to build up a template. So a template is actually the kind of a full email that gets sent out. So we've got an example here that's broken down into various different elements, and they will actually be sent out in the order from top to bottom they're shown on the page. We can lock those from the editing during the send process, and we can also reuse different elements, and that's partly one of the reasons why the template is divided up this way. And Marcus will actually talk through later on a bit more about the development process of creating the HTML, which is also why we build them up like this so we can test and develop and add functionality slowly. So in this example here, we've got a header and a footer which can be shared. You only have to get that signed off once from a branding or legal perspective, and then you can reuse it across your notifications. Whereas something like the reason text in here might be different for each individual template that you've got. So really just to sum up how you build all of that to make a good template, make sure you kind of deliver a concise message, don't overcomplicate things, offer a single call to action, and make use of dynamic content in doing that. Marcus is now going to take you through some of the ways you actually build up a template to do these things.
Thank you, Neil. So we want to We want to help give your templates the best possible start in life by looking at some of our processes and also the limitations on the email and PDF platforms. By considering design constraints of these formats early on, fewer delays will be experienced in project delivery, and templates will be more maintainable throughout their life. So this might seem a bit obvious, but before starting a template project, you need to make sure the purpose of the template has been defined. It should deliver information relevant to the customer's situation, and anything important should be displayed first rather than being buried deep in the content. Also, try to avoid making the emails too long. Many recipients don't have the time to read a long email, and they might miss some important information. There's also an issue where Gmail may truncate the message. If the email is getting a bit too long, consider whether it could be split into 2 or more messages, or if links could be provided off to a website somewhere containing the extended information. So I'm going to talk a lot about email clients. I just want to clarify what an email client is. It's basically the application through which an email is viewed. So, for example, that might be Gmail or the Apple Mail, or it could be the Outlook app on your phone, anything like that, really. A list of email clients that your template will support should be agreed from the start, along with any requirements for special legacy email clients such as OWA or Lotus. If you have to support any of these very old clients, it may mean your design has to be kept very simple in order to cater for them and look consistent across other email clients. The worldwide stats on email clients can be found at emailclientmarketshare.com, and these figures are based on approximately 1 billion emails opened per month. So if you're targeting the top 10 email clients worldwide, you're hitting approximately 90% of the worldwide audience. Something worth mentioning, a lot of people ask about it. Tell what email client someone is using until they open the message. So I mentioned this before. Emails should not be made too long. Well as the recipient's attention wandering, Gmail may truncate the email message if the HTML is larger than 102 kilobytes. They do provide a show entire message link, but in our experience, it actually appears without any styling. You need to keep the design simple to reduce the amount of code used, and your developer must be aware that the HTML needs tailoring for emails. As a guideline, a HTML mockup should be no more than 80 or 90 kilobytes in size. This should allow plenty of headroom for future expansion and long itineraries. So your design may feature dynamic content, as Neil mentioned. One of the main things that gets overlooked is best and worst case place names and personal names of passengers. Always consider how the layout will flow when somebody with a very long name gets inserted into your packs table. The design may feature an unknown number of rows of content, which each contain an unknown number of rows of content. An example of this would be a list of flights, each containing a list of passengers. Make sure you look at some worst case examples when planning your layout, just to make sure it doesn't overflow your template. This is particularly worth bearing in mind when working with a PDF template, as PDF is generally placed on A4 size sheets. Always consider and indicate where page breaks can go in the layout.
So Marcus, I think that's probably an important point there, also when you're testing the template, about the test data you use, isn't there? Because the dynamic fields that we put in are always a certain length, whereas here, if you don't use test data that also has these different number of flights or a different passenger name, it can look very different, can't it?
That's right. It's always try and get realistic test data if you can. It's no good using lorem ipsum because you generally cherry pick. You're in danger of cherry picking the ideal format of data for your design. So always use real data. So your template may also contain a variable number of promotional blocks. These may be upsell or hotel or car hire. In some circumstances, it may get removed from the layout by conditional rules, depending on the circumstances of the recipient. To avoid gaps appearing in the layout, your developer should design the template to have a fluid layout instead of a rigid tabular layout. Your design may also feature tabular data. We find that on mobile displays, it can start to get very cramped when there are more than 3 or 4 columns. So when you're designing your template, design both mobile and desktop views to illustrate how the rows of tabular data should be split up on the screen. Brand fonts are a fairly big issue with emails. They use a technology known as web fonts, and they're not widely supported in email. I believe Apple devices and a handful of modern mobile devices support web fonts. They will also only display when the recipient has an internet connection. It may not always be ideal for travelers. Brand fonts can be supported in PDF if 15 below are given the font files. We can't really use web fonts because the download time may impact the speed of PDF delivery, and they may not be compatible with print formats. I wanted to talk a little bit about design widths of emails as well, and PDF. When we're working in-house on a design, we prefer to work to specific length, specific widths, and so for desktop emails, 600 pixels is ideal because it fits comfortably within a preview window on an email client. It's also fairly printer friendly. The mobile view, we find about 320 pixels is realistic. And for PDFs, we work to a width of 210 millimeters. It's worth noting when working with PDF layout and structure that your dev may find it easier to specify sizes in millimeters. So interactive content that would use JavaScript and iframes in emails is typically not allowed. The main reason for this is security issues. Apple devices can allow Google Maps to be displayed, but there will be a large gap in the template as far as other email clients are concerned, so we don't recommend it. With PDF files, we discourage adding interactive content because it can cause a security pop-up prompting the user for permission. This doesn't give a great feeling of trust. Another trend which is becoming quite popular in templating is to have contextual images behind text. So this may be a destination image. On PDFs, we can do this very easily, no problem at all. With emails, though, the method to produce the background image is very complicated and can be quite temperamental. Email may show 2 banners when forwarded, or if it's open in a very old email client, it will probably show 2 banners.
And where we're designing that, Marcus, we can code for that scenario, can't we, so that they can be put in place. So if you do need help with that, 15 Below can assist and continue to keep the templates maintained via our support team.
That's right, yeah. So now that we've looked at some of the design constraints with email template designs, I'd like to cover some of the limitations of CSS styling that your devs should be aware of. It's a bit technical, so I won't go into great detail. If you'd like to know more, then please get in touch afterwards. Alternatively, we're working on a guide at the moment, which we're planning to release in a few weeks, which will cover a lot of this in great detail. So these are some of the things that we receive from agencies which don't work well in emails. I've tried to separate them into things which should be avoided and things which need alternative arrangements. I'll skim through quite quickly. So in the no support section, I put web fonts there. It's kind of half supported. You should always have fallback fonts if you're going to use them. End child selectors, which would allow you to select, say, the 6th row of a table, are not supported at all. CSS transforms, there's very, very limited support. Your design shouldn't rely on these. Margin top is not supported by any of the Microsoft family of email clients. The display property, which allows things to be displayed in line or block. Again, it's not really widely supported, just allow things to naturally sit the way they would. The position property would allow, it's kind of disallowed because it's a security risk. It would allow malicious emails to place things over the controls of webmail email clients. There's also, we get quite a lot of templates sent in which have been built using website frameworks. They do not really produce HTML tailored to emails. There are some email frameworks and boilerplates available, which I'll be talking about a bit later on. If you'd like more information, then please contact us afterwards.
So Marcus, I suppose one of the reasons why we get those are because the agency doesn't always know that they're doing HTML for an email?
Yeah, they're usually, I find it's usually that they weren't told it needs to be tailored for HTML.
So that's another top tip there, to make sure that if you are getting an external agency in to do HTML, they realise that it's actually for email, not a website.
Yes. There's one property that's used quite a lot for responsive layouts, and that's min and max width. That's in the right-hand column. Max width is fine, but you need to include what are called ghost tables to support Outlook, so that Outlook constrains to the same width as the max width. That will be detailed in my guide, which is coming out in a few weeks' time. Also, you can't really float things in emails very reliably. The safest option there is to place the contents that you want to float inside a table and use the old HTML align attribute. Again, that's going to be covered in the guide, which is coming out soon. So PDF templates aren't really as limited as emails. There are fewer constraints since there's only one platform processing it. There's a few things I will say though, which are there's no need to make a responsive template for PDF or use a framework since it's a fixed size of page. Brand fonts need to be referred to as system fonts, in that you will need to supply us with the fonts to be installed on the platform if you want to use them. We also find when working with PDF that using CSS2 gets the best results in defining the layout and position of elements. Okay. So that's it for CSS style limitations. I hope you're all still there. Again, if you have any questions, please ask afterwards, and we'll try and get back to you. Now we're going to take a look at the process that we follow in-house for building and testing email templates. So generally, when starting to code a new template, we start with an empty template, also known as a boilerplate. A boilerplate is essentially a blank canvas with a number of bug fixes already applied. We have one in-house that we've kind of developed over the years and built upon and got quite good. There's another personal favorite of mine, which is produced by Email on Acid. If you Google them and boilerplate, you'll find the template. There are also frameworks available, such as Foundation and MJML, which include most of the layout structures you would want in an email. Whichever you choose depends on the complexity of your email and your preferences. You might find that a framework is going to be overkill for a simple small email. So we take the empty boilerplate and we start adding sections as rows of content. For each section, we first develop the HTML using only inline styles. This ensures the template will look okay on email clients which don't accept the style tag in the head section of the template. As each section is added, it is tested on popular desktop email clients, as well as the native Android 6 mail app, to make sure the inline styles work properly. Once the inline styles are satisfactory, class names can be added and used with the responsive CSS to get the layout as desired on mobile devices which support it. It's very important to test the email at every stage of development. Every little detail you add must be tested to catch issues as early as possible before they get buried too deep in the code.
So Marcus, would you use different elements for each of these different sections then to build up the template?
Most of the time. I mean, yes, well, well-built email templates are very modular. You have a container, you have the top of the container and the bottom of the container, and they are built up in rows of content. There shouldn't really be more than about 4 or 5 different types of rows of content, because you'd get quite an inconsistent layout.
Yeah.
But each row could then be taken out and put in its own element, as long as all the elements are from a compatible boilerplate template.
Sure.
In an ideal world, the template will be fluid dynamic built, which means that you could transplant one element into another boilerplate and it should be fine. So at 15 Below, we use 2 tools to test emails. We use Litmus and another tool called Email on Acid. They're both very similar. They both have their quirks. They both have advantages over one another. Essentially, you give it your HTML code and it produces a bunch of inbox previews for you, where you can easily see any problems with the template. I'll say it again, it's very important to have good, realistic test data in your template. You should also check that the template can handle all scenarios, including the worst, just to make sure things don't overflow the layout of the template. A final word on testing. It happens an awful lot that people test forwarded emails. Email code is essentially adapted to the email client's own engine when it's received. Now, when you forward an email, it sends that adapted code on to the next person, and the adapted code isn't compatible with the next email client, and the email will appear broken. So if the email must survive being forwarded, try to keep the design simple. But as a rule, just do not test forwarded emails. It won't work very well.
And just one note before we move on from testing of email templates, we don't currently Expose Litmus or email on us through the platform. They are in-house applications that we're using currently, and Neil is working to get those exposed via the user interface. In the meantime, if you do need us to help you with testing of templates, you can provide us with those and we can run them through for you.
I think that's about it from me. Thank you for listening. I'd like to pass you back over to Gemma now.
Thank you. So just to wrap up today's webinar, thank you very much, Neil and Marcus, for your time today. In conclusion, best practice leads to best results. Design with the end user in mind. We will be issuing a template guide very soon. It will be out in the next few weeks and it will be available through the user interface as a download. And if you have asked any questions or you've thought of any questions during the webinar today, please don't hesitate to contact us. You can use the application now to do that, or you can email the account management team and we will come back to you with anything that you're asking. And thank you very much for your time today. Goodbye.